Greetings, Marsh here, and welcome to episode 12 of my Pyanodon's playthrough. In this episode, we are finally going to start making green circuits. Enjoy! I retrofitted our coal mine because it wasn't as dense as it could be, so this is maximum density, where we have one fuel belt coming through the middle, and then they just shoot off each side. And specifically, this one mine here is supplying the fuel for the fuel belt, with some logic in here to put it on both sides and also handle any byproducts. And then after it goes through the mine, it then goes through the factory, so it's a little messy. We are able to put 2 more full-size power plants here. We got additional full-size power plants with another set of mines and some extra belts in case we need more. In total, we have 5 of these full-size power plants and 2 of them making steam. So where in the world are we going to want to build this? Well, it kind of depends, because this is going to be a focus point of all of the resources that our factory has. So we want to choose a location that's as central as possible to all those things. And those do happen to be right here. Things that are not in close proximity would probably be like the copper and the moondrops. The moondrops are very far away down here, and yes, we have too many buildings. I underestimated how good that turd was, so we have more moondrops than we need, but nonetheless it's nice. And copper is there too, but I'm thinking the moondrops will just have a long way to go, that it really does make sense to make our circuits around here. We need somewhere for the belts to go through. Not that this tiny uranium patch is worth worrying about, but nonetheless, let's try not to go on top of it. So belts and things will be coming from above. It might be easier if we just pipe in all of the resources that we need to this location, so we don't really have to worry about it. Iron and copper is relatively straightforward because we already have it, and it just needs to continue off of the end of the bus here, and we'll have to move these belts later as we add more things to the bus, but it is what it is. It's funny how the crash ship is ending up being in the way. Since the wood belt isn't being used for much, that seems like a perfect belt for the moondrops to share, and we should have filter inserters already on the wood belt, and we pretty much do. That will reuse as much of the existing infrastructure as possible. For the priority to work with the moondrops, we have to pull them off the end of the setup after they have been processed into seeds. So it would be this one right here, and that'll be a very long distance for them to go, but also a nice test of our electrical network, since moondrops do use quite a bit of power. And definitely copper feels a little slow now, but we'll be able to upgrade that rather soon, so it's okay. And almost out of our tar buffer, which is nice to see. And yeah, looking at our power demand, the moondrop greenhouses are actually the biggest power consumer right now. Not by much, but they are up there. They do kind of grow a little slowly in the first year. The turd helps with that, but still, it's nice having that production capacity, so we don't have to wait hours for it to populate the belt. Speaking of which, they do seem to be taking a while to get here though. Is it really just that far away? Or did I mess something up? There they are. It is really just that far away. That does it for the solid resources, but we have the liquid ones to bring in now. Saline, water, liquid glass, some kind of fuel, creosote, and carbon dioxide. You can see how these bus lane type of setups get very busy very quickly. So it is important to try to leave room here, because clearly this is the main thoroughfare of our factory right now. So having all this space is appreciated. And this lake is actually kind of in the way. It's a little annoying. I almost wonder if for these pipes we should just go up and over here like the rest of them have, and that will keep them out of the way. And we'll put a pump in there to keep everything nice and pressurized. You could put in like hazard concrete right at the places where the pipes should align, just for nice and clean appearance, but I don't want to use them because it slows the character down. But eventually I might create a pattern on here to make laying pipes a little easier, if you care about that sort of thing, which I clearly do. So there's the creosote. We are focusing everything on our factory to this one point, and man, look at that. We are actively using quite a bit of coke now. Let's see, saline water doesn't actually have a pipe. Does it need one? You know, it might not. I don't know how much saline water is actually going to be going on a pipe bus like this. So, I might regret it, but let's just connect it up here through the side. Of course, in doing this, everything fires up. So we're briefly seeing this operate now. clearing out all of the tailings and turning them into mostly useful resources. And the slaked lime reprocessor does have priority, so all of that is working correctly. So now that this thing is emptied, we can try to change the logic and instead have this setup run to pressurize the tar, because now we're using tar for other resources besides just making the coke. However, we kind of still need to have this as a buffer, because we have other methods of creating the tar that are unrelated to coke. So we'll still need some kind of buffer. And then in order to give it priority, we actually need to input this coke into the back of the other setup. So let's unhook it for a second, because now everything is going to go in reverse. Because this has to come all the way up and into the back of some of these, the things we have to do when we don't have splitters. And then the sorted output will then have to come right back here again. So if I have done this correctly, yep, coke is now going that way, the replacement coke is coming in, and we should have full pipes of tar. So now these will run to fill it up. And yeah, seems good. For now, since we can't have a priority of one of these setups over the other because we currently have 3 of them, the byproduct setups will just dump their tar into this tailings pond and we'll deal with it later. Whereas the primary setup will continue to make it in earnest. You can see the moondrop electricity usage is decreasing, and without radars we can't check on it, but that tells me that it is catching up now. So our setup here is filling up, but it actually seems like this other belt is a lot less dense. So I think we might just have to have, it's going to be dumb, but 10 inserters pushing it to the other side just to keep it going. So we'll have to check on it later, but I think it's good. And there we go. All of this is lined up. The positions of the pipes changed a little, but whatever. And hopefully all of the extents line up here. And they basically do, because the pumps are all in the same spots. So when you do that, that will allow you to create situations like this where you have pumps that are all in the same area and it just looks a little cleaner. There's some of the fluids. One disadvantage of doing molten glass like this is we have multiple pipes that we have to send in rather than one belt, because at the very least we have the molten glass and also the fluid as a fuel, and then further we'll have hot air we have to add too. So it's not necessarily the smartest way of doing things, but it does prevent us from having a huge belt full of glass, which is surprisingly energy dense. In my last playthrough I did things this way and I don't totally regret it, so I'm going to try again. And unfortunately this is just in the way, which I guess is okay because the fuel pipe is in here. Yeah, but early game glass is a very energy dense resource, so I would rather not have it filling up a bunch of our belts. But there we go. Hook them all in. All of our solid resources are here. I believe the last thing we needed was just straight up water. It could come from anywhere. The closest is probably just off to the side here, because we do have this pipe we can just use. So now we just need to figure out how we're going to do this. Let's start with the biggest process, just because it'll take up the most space and might be most restrictive. And we are going to need to have basically a full belt of this, but they only output on one side of a belt, so we're going to need to double them up. And you can actually flip the recipe to put the arrows in different spots. And I'm actually going to space these out a little bit because we also need to have an input. It's going to be relatively small, but okay. Well, it's going to come off of this belt. And we know we're going to need to have 2 inserters worth. And the belt's going to have 2 different items on it, so we need to have filters. And there they go. They are very quick. And then we're going to need 12 of them to crunch these down into fiber, and I feel like we should do them on the outside. I kind of like just having spaces here. Looks slightly better, I think. And there we go. We need 12 of them, and that's not the end of the wood, so it will have to continue. But now that it's been crunched down into fibers, it's much more dense. So the 2 of these can share one belt. And there they are. And now we need to turn the rest of the wood into treated wood, and we can kind of split the sides here and then combine them for the next process. And we actually need to have 2 of these. So we're trying to make the formica, and to do this we're going to need to have probably one of the biggest parts of this setup are these essentially 90 sap trees, and they don't actually have to be hooked up to a belt or anything, so we can put them anywhere. That said, it would be nice if it fit the same profile as everything else, and it would essentially look like this. So that's 96, but that's slightly too many. It will be a perfect square, even though it's slightly too few machines if we just cut this off the end here and just have 88 instead of 88.2. Okay, looks like tar is basically filled up now. So that's looking good. They're still running, but the pipe's full. That's what we want to see. This is why it's nice to have a little bit of space in front of the machines, because some of your resources just need to go in front like that. Okay then. Well, it's time to make a bunch of noise and a bunch of sap. Hopefully we have enough trees. That is a lot of sap. And yep, it's peaking. I'm sure people will look at this and be like, oh, you didn't need to make it that big. Come on, man. True. However, A, I like to have big setups. And B, I think it just is more entertaining on YouTube to see big setups with a lot of stuff that's running rather than tiny little builds where it's one machine into one machine. So there's a couple reasons why I do things this way. But show me the sap. Wow, it's slow. I guess we can get more concrete now. There's room in the inventory for it. Whoo! 11,000. I approve. We'll let those run and catch up. Now we have 3 of the resources that we need, but we also need to make the formaldehyde. And we could grow this where moondrops are, but I decided to make it on site here because we just don't need the methane for much, and sending a methane pipe all over the factory just for this seemed overkill, so I decided to actually grow the moondrops here instead. Not sure if that was the better choice or not, but here we are. If you're careful and you spin everything around, you should be able to get everything in here pretty cleanly. Basically, it's just an input of seeds, and out comes the methane. Probably should have put these in the spot that I wanted them to be in. I am ready for robots. But we can do this, flip it the other way, and now all of the pipes line up. Man, it's so noisy over there. Let's put the moondrops in at least. So this is going down because we need to actually make the seeds. However, this machine will also make moondrops, which we will need to account for. So they're going to come in, but we're going to want to give priority, and we can do that by coming in like this. So hopefully all of that is correct. Let's test it out. So making moondrops and seeds, the seeds go into the machines and the moondrops get placed back through the cycle. Okay, this should cause it to run, making the methane. And the methane does have a fuel value, but the amount of effort to make it is probably too high to consider using it as a fuel. But there we go. We are now storing it in the pipes. Copper and methane makes the formaldehyde. And that's done. And with that, we are basically ready to start making these circuit boards. It's kind of annoying that those pipes are right there where we would want these belts to go, but oh well. These are kind of an awkward shaped machine because they have inputs on the 4 corners. But also we have 3 solid inputs and 1 output, and in general just a lot of requirements. And this is our first use of the pulp mills, but let's pipe everything in and see if it works. First the solids, where they get pulled in on their associated sides, and then the formaldehyde. And there we go, making the formica. Awesome, looking good. And it is very orange. We need to turn these into the actual circuit boards, and we do need 2 machines for this. And this is our first use of the PCB factory, but it's pretty straightforward. Really doesn't need that much. We do need copper, so in it goes. We will need a pressure pump to make the vacuum for this to run. And it is funny that vacuum is considered a liquid here, but just deal with it. And as you might expect, you can basically put the machine anywhere and it will make the vacuum for you. So let's put the copper in, and that should be everything we need. Making circuit boards. Release the circuit substrate. There are no components on these boards yet, so we will need to make those next. And now that this is going, what does the factory look like? Well, definitely the sap extractors are still going, but they're just filling up their buffer, and then they will slow down. And the solid separators are handling ash. But it looks pretty good. There's nothing crazy on our electrical network, and that's usually what I do, is look to see, is there anything on the network that's just way more than everything else? And right now, it looks pretty okay. And from here we can basically make whatever, but in order to make the belts simpler, we should probably focus on clearing resources out so we don't need to have a belt for it anymore. So for example, we have already used logs. So if we do anything else that needs logs, we won't have to worry about them anymore. And the other log item are the Copper-Zinc batteries. And this is going to be a little interesting because we need cellulose for this, and cellulose is a 10-minute decay time. So looking at the cellulose here, it decays into biocrud, which is kind of bad. So ideally, we wouldn't want it to do this. The recipe for making cellulose makes it one at a time, which is nice. And then the battery needs 5 of them, which is less nice. We will want to have some kind of logic in here to minimize how much waste there is. First, let's actually make the cellulose. So making the limestone, it is annoying that this number is slightly higher than 7.5, but I do think this can actually work fine because we have our 12 buildings here. If we just change the directions, that would essentially make this 2 belts while still making it half and half. And there we go. So let's make the cellulose, and it's a pretty straightforward building. It's just high on the energy consumption, something like that. And we need a total of 12 of them. Let's get everything mostly hooked up, but wait on actually hooking it up until we have some logic to make sure that it works. So the way that we are going to handle this, because direct insertion isn't really reasonable with how many machines we need, and because the decay time is relatively fast, that we will only turn these machines on and off when we need a certain amount of output. So first we need the actual assemblers, and we need to make sure that we can get enough inserters on them. And it is quite a few. And let's put filters on the inserters just so we can see what the resources would be. We want to have a filter on here because we definitely don't want to have cellulose just sitting in that fuel slot. And because we know that the recipe requires 5 cellulose, we really don't want to have any extras sitting in the machine. So here's the first use of the circuit network, because there's just really no other way of doing this. Where we want to read the contents and also the contents of the crafting recipe, we essentially want to have 2 crafts worth of cellulose in the machine, 5 waiting to get used, and the other 5 that are making the battery, but we don't want any more than that. Not that we can stack anything more than 1, but let's just say stack size of 1. If cellulose is less than 10, because certainly if it is 10 or more than 10, we don't want to put any more in there. But this will make sure each machine only gets what it needs to run. And this kind of setup is going to create some amount of spoilage. I don't want to go nuts trying to avoid it when we don't really have a bunch of circuit network stuff yet. But this will at least make sure the machines aren't completely full of items and then not producing anything. However, any odd amount of resources are going to get stuck at the bottom and not get used, but it is what it is. And then we can have an inserter here, specifically picking up the biocrud. Assuming all of this is good, which it seems like. Now the final part of the control system here is having a buffer chest where we read the contents and only allow the cellulose to go through when we're below a certain number. And probably the easiest way of doing this is just to have an enable and disable condition on the buildings themselves. Say can only turn on if we have, let's say, less than 10 batteries in that chest, and if so, they will be allowed to run. So let's give this a shot and see if it works. So we shoot in the resources. It's actually a very expensive recipe. 7 wood and 4 limestone is quite a lot, but now they're going because they don't have a battery signal. And out comes the cellulose, and it is immediately deteriorating. And let's check to see if this stops when it has 5 total cellulose in the machine. And yep, disabled by control behavior here. Because it's a balanced setup, we don't really see it stop, but it is. And all of these are running on their coke. Let's see what happens when this gets to 10. Now that it has, we have the purple light for the first time because all of these have shut down, and they have done what they can. They're going to have little bits of cellulose left over in each machine, but that's kind of unavoidable without actually counting the cellulose and making sure it comes out in groups of 5. That this is going to create a little bit of waste, but I think that's okay. Limestone and wood isn't particularly valuable, so the main concern from all of this waste is simply the biocrud. So as long as it doesn't build up very fast, it'll be okay. And this is going to create some ash as a byproduct. We can just throw that on the other belt as well, and it will eventually go to where it needs to. for now. It's going to be right there. We'll have to remember that it's there. It's so much stuff in here. But no splitters. This is what you get. So in they go, making solder, and it gets shot out. This guy doesn't like that this is on a curve, and that happens. I suppose eventually it's just going to fill up and it'll be able to grab them. So we have our resources coming in, and now they are combined, because these are some of the final outputs that we need to make circuits. But there we go. The plates have backed up and now it's working. Well, we do need to make a bunch of ceramic, and that'll go into 2 of the builds. So let's do that. Well, shale oil is definitely filling up. I kind of want to just unplug this for now. Let's just stop the stone from being returned to the system, and I guess temporarily kind of block that too. Because once we start making glass for circuits, I'm pretty sure all this shale oil is going to disappear, so it won't be a problem for much longer. Let's run this out so at least we can see where we're going, and I'm getting surprisingly close to the aluminum patch. I was not expecting that, but things always end up being bigger than you expect. We can do direct insertion onto this machine, so there it goes. And having 1 inserter as an output should be fine there. So what does the ceramic go into? How about let's do the ceramic capacitors first. And there it goes. It would be nice to put both of the items on this belt since we're here. So how about let's make the other thing that needs the ceramic. We've already made these before. The air core inductors, this is just the better recipe. Feels like it's getting a little darker. Technically the sun's not going down yet, but it is later in the day, and that does make things darker. But there we go. Making the inductors and putting it on that one belt. And now we have 4 of the items that we need to make circuits with, but there's more. Well, tin is only used in one more thing, and that's the resistors. We should probably space this in such a way where we can potentially put more electronics factories on the other side. And these are our last 2 pipes waiting to get used. In goes the fuel, in goes the glass. It looks like I put it in the wrong pipes. Yay. Okay. Correct sides this time. There it is. Printing out our glass. Okay. Shoot the resources out. Looking good there. Now the vacuum tubes. And we could probably just use this one glass machine because it needs relatively small amounts of glass. Let's put the graphite machine up front just so it's easy to see. And that needs a pretty decent amount of coke to run. But there it goes. And now finally the copper and iron belt gets to its terminus. There we go. And then the graphite and glass goes in. And now finally we need to add some vacuum. It's kind of a weird way of looking at it. And it'll run, making the vacuum. And then all of these will go. We're getting very close now. There we go. Vacuum tubes. Well, we need to keep pushing the resources forward. And we have one more item waiting for us, all the way down here. Feels like an eternity ago, but if you recall, we were making circuit boards. And now that we are actively using even a little bit of that glass, suddenly all of the shale oil is being sucked away. So at least we can hook that up, but I still don't want to make any more shale until we have cleared through all of this. The factory's energy use is about to spike as we start hooking everything up here. And in fact, it kind of already is. Look at the high pressure furnaces right here. And that is basically all of this. That most of the energy of this circuit setup is going into these high pressure furnaces to make the cellulose. That's part of the reason why we don't want to waste it, is because that's just where all the energy is going. It looks like we are starting to get some spoilage in here, which is what we would expect. So since that is happening, let's try to get rid of it. It would be nice to have them on separate parts of the belt. So biocrud will go on one, the ash will go on the other. Where would we want to put this? Well, this is going to make very little ash, and we have ash right here, so why not just dump it in there and get rid of it? We'll cut that off for now, because we'll have the biocrud, and we might as well just put it in a chest. Well, if you look at this, we have our 7 input items required to make green circuits. And the only thing that's left is the chip shooter. And we had to wait on this, because to make the chip shooter, we actually needed to have some of those green circuits. And I don't really want to go on top of the aluminum ore for this. So, even though I just put all these things here, let's pick everything up. Make a big mess of our inventory. And just make the chips here. So, without long-handed inserters, This is extremely awkward, and let's see how all this works. A lot of our factory has prepared us for this, that essentially the entire output of every mine and every plant that we're making is being focused and condensed onto this one machine. So let's see it work. I like the sound it makes. And there we go. It's a pretty fast machine, and it chokes through a lot of resources. And there's some random stuff we don't need here we can get rid of. We'll probably find our power output skyrocketing here, but this is about what we would expect. It's those high pressure furnaces that are sucking up all the power now, and it's unavoidable. With a setup like this, it's just how it is. But the actual production of power is holding out just fine. It's nowhere close to the maximum. But there we go. Boom. Just like that, we have circuit boards. And of course we'll immediately want to start researching things that use those circuits. However, that's going to have to wait until the next episode. Thanks for watching, and I will see you later.